Hello and welcome to the Vedic Conversation, where in each episode we give our views or invite our guests to talk about a number of different topics through the lens of storytelling and from the perspective of the Veda, an ancient but still very much relevant body of knowledge from India. I'm Anthony Thompson, a Vedic meditation teacher based in London, and I'm joined by my Vedic colleagues Derrick Yanford in New York and Rory Kinsella in Sydney. In this episode, our guests are two colleagues, Kristen Vandivier and Issy Keoseyan, who work closely together on a number of important projects. They talk about their podcast, Being the Change, which is based on the need of the times to shift the perception of seeing people as other. This important approach is also applied to their other projects, teaching meditation to the people working with the Ape Action Africa Sanctuary in Cameroon, the women inmates in Almoloya prison in Mexico, the women weavers in San Juan, Colorado, art and movement therapies to the children of Casa Guatemala, and they work with a charity looking after vulnerable breast cancer patients in Mexico and Latin America. Additionally, we talk about the power of the feminine divine. I'm sure you'll find this revealing and powerful episode really interesting. Let's get into the conversation, and don't forget to stick around until the end, where we'll share with you how you can become involved in the conversation. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Yay, thank you.
Izzy and I are a package deal, so.
Yeah.
You come as a package deal. We get great value. So I met you guys originally in India in 2019 when we were on the banks of the Ganga. And in fact, you guys and I are the same graduation year, I think, in IT, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was such fun. And I know you in the last year or so have been incredibly busy putting together the most fantastic program under the banner of Meditation Without Borders. And I know a little bit about the history, but I would love to hear from you guys how you kind of put this together, because this is quite an all-encompassing kind of project. And having looked on your website, I see that you have 5 other things that kind of fall in under the umbrella of this. And I looked at this and I just thought, busy. Only women with the divine organizing power, such as you two, could take on such an enormous workload. And we will come to the particular independent projects in a moment. But do just tell us what Meditation Without Borders is all about. It's such a great name, and tell us how you came up with the name and came up with the project and what you're actually doing right now.
Is that you, Izzy?
No.
Are they coming
Not
for
this
you?
time. I do live in a busy street, but it's not me this time.
Hands up, it was me.
Thought they might be coming for you. No, Meditation Without Borders is a passion project for us that we came up with it now, I guess 2 years ago. Was it?
But the original idea, we kind of discussed it while we were in IT.
Yeah, that's true. When we were rooming together.
Yeah, we were rooming together and we absolutely loved each other the first night and the rest of the time after that. And what we were discussing was about, because Kristen had this idea even before going to IT about teaching migrants in the United States how to meditate. And then she was like, well, we need somebody that speaks Spanish. And so when we met each other at IT, it was like, let's do this thing. And it was just kind of something that we talked about, like something that we would like to do in the future. And then 2 years ago, Kristen.
Well, yeah, I mean, I live in California, so, I was observing that there's a lot of people where I live, but, all over the world that don't have access to these kind of practices. And so I went into our training with that in the back of my mind. And when I met Isabel, it's like, great, someone who speaks Spanish, because I wish I spoke Spanish and I don't. But that opens up a whole group of people that normally wouldn't get this knowledge. And so we started talking about it then. And then it was a good idea. Ding.
Ding, ding, ding. That's where the money is. Not the money, the consciousness.
Yeah. We were on the beach, and you were visiting me in California, and we were meditating together. And after that meditation, we just looked at each other and was like, we have to do this. And it's going to be called Meditation Without Borders. And at first I was like, really? It's kind of a generic name. And I just was impressed that no one had been using it, really. But I'm like, it needs to just describe what it is. I wanted people to just get it the second they heard it, and so we are about bringing meditation to groups of people in need around the world, and to people who don't normally have access to this kind of knowledge and practice. So that's the mission. But, the greater mission, it's very faceted, as you said. It's very Shakti, there's a lot to it. And part of it is also getting across the message that meditation itself is a act of social change. A lot of people think of meditation as like, oh, this is a self-care thing. This is for me. This is my, going to a spa or, getting my nails done. And it's so much bigger than that. And it's about, the violence and destruction happening in the world is due to consciousness. It's due to consciousness that is angry, that is upset, that is not expanded. So if we're able to uplift the collective consciousness through meditation and bring it to areas where it's never been, then that's the first step to changing the world. So not a small mission.
But what was so interesting was that at that time period, like historically, when I went to visit Kristen, there was, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a crisis in the border of Mexico and the United States, with the children being separated from their families. Their parents were being sent back to Mexico and all of their other countries where they came from, and the children were separated. And it was a quite difficult time, and something. It was like we need to teach these people how to meditate, because if we could just reach out to them and teach them, it could help them move through this in a much better way. And so that's when we started thinking that most people who suffer in the world don't have access to it. Only the more privileged people have access to meditation. People are thinking about, well, I need to feed my children. Meditation isn't something that they don't even think about, something that they should do. So it was like, we need to serve these people, because the people who are suffering the most don't have access to it.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point, but I'm just going to pick you up on one thing you just said there, which is that, the people who are suffering most in the world need it. I couldn't agree more with you. But are you saying that it's only impoverished people who suffer?
No.
No.
Because you could have the argument could be made that actually you need to educate, you need to teach meditation to people who are well educated, who have money, because they can then facilitate the change. They can reach out and help the people who are impoverished. That in a way it's a two-pronged attack, that the wealthy people reach out and help, and the not so wealthy people, the impoverished people, also help themselves. But if it's a joint enterprise, then perhaps you could have a bigger impact.
It's like a consciousness trickle down theory.
Well, is it a theory, or is it
No, I don't. I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just kind of reminds me of the economic theory, and it's true. And the point of like who is most suffering. You cannot look at a person and know to the degree to which they're suffering. There may be a billionaire who has everything going for them, who's suffering far more than someone who's, impoverished and having, having a severe disability. There's no way to say who is suffering. Suffering is a consciousness state, and so yes, it's not to say those who are most suffering, but there are areas where there are higher demand in the world. There are people who are experiencing higher demand in the form of whether, or not they are experiencing, whether it is impoverished or whether they're in prison or whether or not they're refugees or whether or not they are in a socioeconomic group or racial group that doesn't normally have access to this kind of practice.
Yeah.
So it's more categories in that way and seeing like, okay, these are people who are going through some things. And so to ease the demand, but yes, we can't really say those who are suffering most because you don't know who's suffering most. And it's presumptuous to say one person is suffering more than another.
Yeah. So really you're giving the opportunity to those people who lack the chance and the opportunity, so to speak.
Exactly.
So you mentioned prison. Now, I know that one of the projects, one of the facets of your organization is, I'm probably not going to get the pronunciation right, but the Almoloya prison in Mexico. Tell me a little bit about your engagement with that and why are you actively working with them at the moment, or is this on the horizon?
Well, we were already had everything planned. There's this association in Mexico called Plan B. And so I met with them and they were very keen on teaching meditation. So I went with them to the prison. They wanted first to see how I felt, to kind of get in touch with the people at the prison, see how they were feeling about meditation, just kind of scout a little what was happening. So I went with them to the prison. I met it's a women's prison. So we went, we did all these arts and crafts activities, and they were very interested in learning meditation. And it was just fascinating because you usually sometimes think of people in prison just as different people, and they're regular people. It was very fascinating. So we were there all day and they were very excited, and they were actually very kind people. I know, well, they must have done some stuff, but it was an amazing opportunity. So we already had everything planned to do it in May of last year, and then COVID hit. And so we've had to postpone teaching there. I actually talked to the woman from Plan B today, and they don't have COVID under control at the prison just yet. So they're doing everything through Zoom. And as you know, our practice has to be taught from molecule to molecule.
Great molecules. Yeah.
We have to wait a little bit, but we were going to teach about 200 women. Kristen was obviously going to fly in, and we had everything planned out. Students of mine were going to volunteer to, get everyone together. And it's something that we're very looking forward to, because at the end of the day, the receptivity that these women had was amazing. They were very keen in learning how to meditate.
That's fantastic. Well, I wish you well. I hope that happens quickly, because obviously the need is very great there. Yeah.
Yeah. Right now we're in a position of so many of our projects got pushed back due to COVID. We had a full roster last year, I think, of almost one a month. and then COVID happened. And so right now we're rescheduling everything, and things are getting pushed to, the fall is the earliest we're looking at, but a lot of them are getting pushed to 2022, just because a lot of these places too, like there's the Indigenous Weaving Collective we're talking to. These are places with, people who are pretty isolated, and we're very cautious about bringing our germs there. Even though we are vaccinated, but we want to be extra cautious with these populations.
Yeah. Now, am I right in thinking that both of you had careers in advertising and PR?
How did you know?
I tell you how I know, because I've been listening to your podcast. And it just sounds really interesting. And, you've obviously, those skills, those very professional skills that you picked up in that profession, I detect are being applied in this project. Would you say that was a very useful foundation for the work that you're doing?
Yeah, the advertising for me has always been interesting because I was both an art director and a writer. And so, you know, it's communication. And so what we're doing is communicating. It's just, to me, it's a much better message than, a message about filet of fish sandwiches, you know, which is what I used to do.
Oh, wow.
But it's about taking a lot of complex ideas and condensing them into something, that is understandable and digestible. So on that hand, yes, but also, the ability to make a website and not have to involve outside people for that. Um, and also doing the podcast, these are all things that we got to use our skills, I'd say.
Yeah. And for me, I was in sales in TV for product placement. And obviously, if you love something, you're going to sell it much better. Love my job, so I wasn't great at it. But
so what was the craziest thing that you had to place or sell?
That's an interesting question.
Or what was the thing that didn't sit well with you?
I don't know if you've seen the meme of the dog in the lab that's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. That was me in my previous job, just like.
For me, it was Tag body spray, probably. I did a lot of work for Tag body spray, which is just, oh my God, it's just embarrassing. It's, like the casting sessions. It was the most sexist, awful stuff. And I think they put me on it because I was like the one woman. So they're like, look, we're not sexist. We have a woman working on it. And, yeah, I'm sure I've got there's a lot of karmic payback from those days. So.
Talking about being the only woman, I mean, it's a particular theme of some of the projects that you're doing is that they are female centric.
Yeah.
That you're concerning yourselves with women in prison, women weavers, breast cancer, and of course, as Vedic meditators, we're fully aware of the amazing power of the Mother Divine, the organizing power of the Mother Divine. So I salute you again for putting this all together. And I mean, do you see this as an urgent rebalancing of the dynamic? Considering we're living in the age of Kali Yuga and there's a lot of work to be done. Obviously, women need support, but men need educating.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting you bring that up because we don't have it in the description, but yes, this is a project of divine feminine, in its truest sense, not in women, because most people think feminine, they think women, but in the aspect of consciousness that is nurturing, the aspect of consciousness that feels that everyone is deserving of love, the mothering aspect of consciousness, and that's not just to say that mothers are the only ones who mother. Men have these aspects of consciousness as well, but this is what we're trying to uplift in everyone, be they female or male or somewhere in between, And so it is a feminine, this is a feminine project, but to me, I don't like to be exclusive in that sense, because we all have the feminine within us, and gender is something that's gotten to be much more fluid. It's, I think in the beginning when things were coming out that they're exclusive for women, I think that's good because this is, women trying to find their place. However, I feel like we're ready to reach beyond that and start to embrace the feminine in all, and bring this, I'm a mother of how many now? I don't even know. 3, soon to be 4. So,
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It's another one of my projects, apparently. This one I didn't choose, but that's okay. But it's about that mothering, but mothering beyond just your immediate family and mothering the whole world. And, when we teach mothers and women to meditate, women tend to be the sun of their solar system, and so whenever I teach a mom, I feel like I'm teaching a whole community. So we do tend to we veer that way, but it's certainly not exclusive to that.
J grew Dev to that.
Yay.
I've thought about this a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, have you come across the phenomena of kind of a male emasculation, that men are feeling bewildered, confused, particularly young men, perhaps in their late teens, 20s, and early 30s, who are bewildered and confused by the rising and vociferous dynamic of the feminine consciousness, that their education, their upbringing hasn't taught them to have a broader perspective, and so they don't really understand how to behave, what the rules are. I certainly have young male students who are very confused about what's going on, how they should be responding to things. And of course, I, being probably old enough to be their father, although I have kids probably who are a little bit older than them, I have children in their late 20s and early 30s. I can tap into what's kind of going on. But have you come across this at all? And do you find that you can give them solace and reassure them that things are going to go okay?
Why don't you take this one, Issy? you have more contact with younger men than I do.
Go, Issy.
Well, in Mexico, actually, I think it's a little worse than maybe in the countries that you guys are in, because Mexico is a very male dominant country. And so the rise of the female organizing power has gotten to be very violent.
Violent.
Yeah. Like the feminists here are, it's gotten to the point where it's kind of aggressive. There was like when the women go out into the streets and to celebrate the femininity, it gets a little violent. So men are a little afraid of it. So most of my students are women. I think it's also because of the rise of the female consciousness. So what I've tried also to encourage is to have this motherly side. I mean, I know the violence has been because the way that things have happened in Mexico are no longer acceptable. So the women have just become a little violent because that's the way they have to defend themselves. So it's actually been quite interesting because I've had more access to trying to teach women to find their power, not strictly through violence, but other means. So that has been very, very interesting, because at the same time, not men necessarily, but the masculine energy doesn't really know how to react to this. Instead of finding like common ground in which they can correlate and grow together, it's been a separation. And so women are rising and men don't know how to react to this. So I've been more on the female side just because most of my community is female. My group meditations, it's maybe 1 or 2 men at the most. So it's been kind of trying to guide them through what our role is. And I know if it gets to be bad, Kali comes. But it doesn't always have to be that. So I'm trying to help in whatever way I can to kind of guide them in the non-violent approach to things. I don't know if I responded to your question, but that has been my experience.
It's true. I have a lot more women coming too, and the men who come, I have one man who came independently, but most of them came through a woman, to me. So but those men are already, because they've come through a woman, they are pre-vetted to, they're going to take a woman's advice, so that kind of man is already okay with his feminine side to some degree. But I think what's happening with a lot of the young men and older men too is, for so long there's been a false strength of masculinity. It hasn't really been a true strength. It's been this kind of strength through force, as Isabel was talking about. And so now, men who have the masculine more enlivened in them, they don't know what is the strong masculine. What does that even look like? And women are now finding, like, what is strong feminine? What does that look like? What does it look like to fight from the feminine point of view? What does that feel like? So we're trying as a collective to even figure out what it is we're striving for, and not fall back on those old definitions of strong masculinity, which was to be violent, to be overbearing, and to realize that we have the balance of both within us, and that we can, and that a lot of strength comes from having both those sides enlivened.
Yeah, because I think what's happened in Mexico is that the women think that their power comes from embodying the male aspects of power, instead of finding the true power within of what the female consciousness can actually do if we really tap into it. So that has been something that we've tried to develop through our group meditations, through the knowledge, through everything. And it's actually very interesting because my male students are usually a lot younger, because they're more adaptable and okay with what is happening, versus the older male students who they're not as open, and they're not as open as with learning with a woman. Like older men, they look at me like I'm gonna learn from a girl. Like, and so I've had very few male students who are older. So it's a very interesting time.
Now, I don't want to hog all the questions because Rory and Derrick, I know, have got lots, but just my final question on this point is that, am I right in thinking that Mexico is a Catholic country?
Yes, very
So,
Catholic.
I mean, very Catholic. So the established religion has a woman playing a very central role in it. And often in Latin-speaking countries, the mother in the family has a very significant role, a much stronger role perhaps than the father. And yet, isn't it interesting that the mothers, in a sense, have lost control of their sons, that they've allowed the sons to kind of break away and start behaving in a way which is against the better interests of society? Do you think that can be recaptured?
I think so. Because as you said, I think Mexico is a very mother divine oriented country, even though they don't understand it the way we do. But the Virgin of Guadalupe, which is like the Mexican Virgin, which is she's dark skinned. So for Mexicans, that's the true mother. And so it is a very a country that is very devoted to the mother, to the feminine, but that has you said it perfectly, Anthony, how it's lost control. And I think if we use that love, we could really do something special.
Of course, we have to be very careful in a Vedic conversation talking about control, because we understand that control is opposed to evolution. But I think we all understand what we mean by control, which is just getting it back into balance, perhaps.
Exactly.
Passing the mic. I just wanted to bring it back to a bit more. We love to hear about people's meditation stories and how they got into meditation and what inspired them to teach. So could you both talk about that for a bit? I can imagine that the hectic world of product placement just making you go, oh no, I need to do something more meaningful, which is probably most of our stories. But yeah, Issy, maybe you go first.
Yeah. Well, I studied communications in Mexico, and it was because I wanted to make movies, and because in Mexico there's no real film school, so I was like, well, this is the most the thing that's most similar to that. And now looking back, I think I was just fascinated with stories and life, and how people rise from the ashes, because that's what I love about movies. So I was like, okay, this is what I want to do, and really look into the characters and inspire people through movies. And so when I was in college, I did a foreign exchange program in Los Angeles, and I was very depressed at that time. Kristen has heard this like a million times, but I used to smoke a lot of pot. And so when I was in LA, because I kind of escaped of Mexico, I was like, this is not the country for me, even though I was born and raised here. I was like, I need to get out, and Mexico is the problem. It's not me. So when I was in Los Angeles, one day I was like, things are exactly the same, even though I'm here. So I was like, I need to do something different. So I Googled meditation, and Christian Bevacqua's site came up. So I sent him an email. I went to an intro talk. I loved him. And I was like, when's the next course? And my life completely changed. And I've never been like constant in anything in my life except for meditation. It's like, this is amazing. And then I went back and I was working at this TV company, and I was not doing the movies and inspiring people. And I was like, who cares if the actor is holding the Coke in the appropriate way? Nobody cares.
Coke
Like,
care.
Yeah.
Coke can, yeah.
A few people in Coke care. The Coca-Cola company. But I was like, this isn't, nobody cares about my job. I'm not really helping anyone. And I saw the stress of living in Mexico City and having an office job. And my company was downsizing and people were so stressed. There was a woman and she had 2 seizures at the office. And I was like, okay, I need to do what helped me the most. And so I was like, okay, I think I want to teach meditation. So I sent Christian an email like, hey, I don't know if you remember me. I took your course like 5 years ago. I want to be a meditation teacher. And he was like, okay. So I started traveling to Los Angeles, doing all the prerequisites, and I did it all in a year. And then the next year I was doing our initiator training. And it took me a while to realize that that's the way that I wanted to help people. But it's very interesting because what I've always been fascinated with has been life and how people rise from the ashes, and meditation is exactly what it does. So I was like, I found it.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, for me, I did it probably starts around, I was in my 20s and working in advertising and, all that. And I wasn't that pleased with what I was doing. And then I had a Rashi come, a big wave of change came, and it was so massive. Within a period of 3 weeks, my mother passed away. I went from LA to Boston. I changed jobs. I changed apartments. I changed boyfriends. And just, from the beginning of September to the end of September 2006. And so when my mother passed away, it was very traumatic and sudden. And that trauma kind of kicked me into a higher consciousness state for a couple days. I was I didn't know what it was at the time. It was kind of a unity consciousness state. And I was just walking around. Everything was sparkling. And I felt like everything was one. I wasn't even remotely sad, even though this was the person I loved more than anything in the world was gone, because she didn't feel gone from that state of consciousness. And then it all crashed. It wasn't stabilized. I wasn't a meditator at that point. It just was like a glimpse of something else. And then after that experience, that really stayed with me. And I wanted to know, what was that? How do I get back to that? And so I did yoga. And a few years later, I found the style of meditation and started practicing. And it was always a little bit, I wasn't terribly consistent at first, but I'd always come back to it because I always liked the way it felt. And I was still in advertising. I had a couple children, and my marriage was in kind of a tough place. It always, whenever we have one who's about 2 years old, it always seems to get to be in a tough place. But the inspiration to teach also came in a flash. I wasn't thinking about it at all. I was a part owner of a shoe brand that I was the marketing director of at that point. And I was in the middle of a yoga class one day when suddenly a voice came into my head that said I needed to go to India the following year to learn to teach. And if you've ever had one of these in consciousness cognitions, like I started arguing with it, of course. And I was like, what do you mean? That's impossible. Like, I have a baby, I have this job. And the voice came back and it said, okay, it's impossible. Okay, but what if it wasn't impossible? What would that look like? And I was like, okay, well, interesting. I guess I could do this. And then finally I was like, but why next year? And then it didn't come back as a voice, but what came back as the feeling of a presence. And I had felt a presence before. I felt my mother before after she died. But this, at first I was like, oh, it's my mom. And then I was like, no, it's someone else. And then I thought, who is this? And just as soon as I asked the question, I knew it was a baby that needed to come. And so I'm in the middle of this yoga class and I'm now sobbing because I'm feeling the presence of a baby that's on his way. And it hit me like that. And it took me months to kind of like, well, what was interesting, actually 2 weeks later, the company that was like 11 years, an 11-year-old company that I was owner of, it just closed, it shuttered. And I felt like, oh my God, did I do that? Sorry. But it was, and I had to ask myself, what do I want to do next? And nothing was charming except the path to teach. It was like nothing, that was the only way left. And so I hadn't even told my husband yet. I was too terrified. And so I went to a rounding retreat to talk to Tom about it. And then when I came back, I told my husband. He turned green because it meant that he was going to be left with two small children. At the time, I had a 1.5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old. And so for those who don't know, the training involves 3 months away in India. So he was going to be left with them. Not only that, but, rather than me getting another job, I was going to be spending a whole lot of money on prerequisites and having to spend the time to learn. But I did, this was June, and so I did all the prerequisites, got through all the Vedas and all the cities, and then went to India in January. So that's how I learned, that was my path.
Amazing. How did your husband cope?
He was great. What was funny was, he was a meditator too. But he was kind of sporadic like me. What's funny is it was after I had the intuition to go, I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to teach this stuff, I have to be consistent. So that was when I actually started being consistent. And then I went, when I went, it was the first time he did it every day. It wasn't always twice a day, but it was the first time he did it every day. And when I came back, he was a different person. He was actually better when I came back after, even with the increased demand, because he was meditating every day. So it was interesting. He did okay. It somehow worked out. The kids were just at the right age that it wasn't that traumatic for them that I left, but they were old enough to not be too difficult. And a lot of things lined up to make it work out. So he had some help from family, though honestly, I think he found the weeks he was on his own easier.
But am I right in thinking, Kristen, the next time you went back to India was in 2019?
Yeah.
With little Adrian, the little baby boy.
That was the boy, I felt.
He must be now, what, 3?
He's 2. He'll be 3 in August, so he's almost 3.
Yeah,
And,
what was so wonderful, and I'm sure I'm not alone in having had this experience, was watching your baby with Tom's baby, and there were some other little children around at the same time, and just watching these Vedic kids, for lack of a better expression, but children who have been born to meditating parents, the atmosphere, the way they interacted between each other and with adults, with strangers, was quite astonishing. Because they hardly any of these children cried. I don't think I ever heard any of them cry in the space of, well, you were there I think you were there for 2.5, 3 weeks. I never heard this little chap cry. I mean, he's maybe he does, maybe you have him under control, but he just seemed to be he was a little bliss baby.
Yeah, he was a little chubby bliss baby.
Yeah. Give him my regards. He won't remember me, but he is just the sweetest little chap.
He
He's
is.
Going through all the yagyas for like 5 hours and loving it.
I have a
He's-
feeling it was his idea that, he arranged that somehow. So it was, I
He
was
was at
just along
home.
for
Yeah.
the ride.
Take me to my homeland.
Right.
So next time, are you going to bring number 4 with you?
Yeah, hopefully. I don't know when the next time will be. It'll be interesting to see when India
Yeah.
opens up and we can go back. But yeah, I will absolutely bring number 4. And
Brilliant.
it'll be a weird deja vu to be there with an infant again, just another infant.
This time.
I'd love to bring them all, but I need to be making a lot more money than I am right now. That's an expensive trip.
And maybe bring your husband as well.
Yeah, he can come.
He can go.
He can help out. He can watch him for me.
Speaking of making money as a meditation teacher, it's kind of hard enough as it is. How do you balance the meditation without borders with, regular teaching, especially as, newish teachers?
Good question. Meditation Without Borders is a nonprofit, but nonprofits are really expensive to put together. So we've funded it ourselves to get the upstart going. We've had quite a few donations from people, though, until we actually have our projects, we know exactly when they are and have the exact budgets for them. We're not doing hardcore fundraising yet. But, once things really get going, I'll probably balance between teaching courses that are, through my own private practice, and also teaching courses that are benefits for the nonprofit profit. But I do other work, and my husband works, and so meditation isn't our only source of income.
Yeah, for me it is. But yeah, it's one the one project that we did do was teaching at FUCAM, which is this center for breast cancer, and I mean, we obviously didn't make any money of it because it was just so close, and we didn't really have to do anything, just make the time for it, and it was really wonderful. It's just such a wonderful thing that it's like, if I don't care if we only need money just to fund the projects.
Yeah, we're not looking to make money here. And the projects themselves, the way we vet which projects we do is based on, we tend to work in partnership with other organizations that tend to do all the setup for us, so that really we just come in and do our thing. So that way our energy is spent teaching and less on logistics. And the great thing about meditation is it's pretty cheap. You just need a space and some time.
Yeah,
the flights,
Some incense, candles.
right? Some candles, exactly.
Exactly.
Some flowers. It's not, we don't need a huge budget for each project.
Yeah, and for our board, we have a lot of volunteers who are Vedic meditators. So there's so many people who've reached out, like, I want to volunteer. So yeah, we can also kind of spread what each person can do. Some people, they can, for FUCAM, one of my students who's become a great friend, Gata, she volunteers, and she's the one who organized everything. She was like, Izzy, you need to be here at this time, at this place, and just go and teach. So we didn't really, as you said, our energies is just towards teaching so that we can be the most efficient we can be.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because Vedic meditation can only be taught in person, and when COVID showed up and the world shut down and we weren't able to engage the way that we were able to, and now as things are starting to go back to normal and we're reintegrating, I'm just curious for each of you, what would you say the biggest gift has been offered to you in that time where we're not able to do the thing that we love to do the most? What do you, and as we start to, go back to doing that, how has the pandemic kind of influenced how you're going to reshape, or how it informs how you're going to teach now as you did before, when we never knew that this would be taken away from us?
Who wants to go first?
I think there's been a lot of gifts. It's great to have phrased the question that way, because so many people, going like, oh, focusing on what's been taken away. But and it was frustrating at first when it was like, oh, we had all these projects and everything, all expectations for the year suddenly changed and shifted. But we got to because we were not doing our projects, we started the Being the Change podcast. And I don't think we would have gotten that off the ground had we been busy doing the projects. So that was something that we really enjoy doing, and that has gotten our presence out there, so that now when we hit the ground later this year and next year, now we're well known. People know who we are, know what we're all about. And we have that presence that will help us with fundraising, that will help us with when we reach out to people, it's like, oh, well, listen to our podcast, that'll give you a sense of who we are. And other than that, it was a beautiful year of, I ended up homeschooling my kids, and, the focus went from my work to my family this year. And so we had this beautiful year of a lot of attention going to them. And I know that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Yeah. For me, obviously, as well, for being the change.
Like, yeah.
No, not at all. I love your family dearly. But yeah, for me, obviously, being the change has been amazing, because what we were thinking was, well, if we can't teach, how can we try to rise a collective? And it was like, well, let's do this thing. Let's talk about these issues. And what we do is sometimes we're like, okay, can you record tomorrow at 5? Yes. And then we're there like, what should we talk about? And then something comes and it's like, okay, the need of the time is probably what's happening here. And we just kind of we have no outline. We just talk through. So that's been very, very wonderful. And a lot of students have come because they've heard the podcast. And something that has been a gift as well has been teaching in smaller groups. At first I wasn't teaching at all, but then I was like, well, the need of the time is people are very stressed because of COVID. And so I was like, I need to teach. I'll be teaching one-on-one with my mask on, and let's do this thing. And so before COVID, I just had these times I was like, okay, I'm going to teach from the 5th to the 8th or whatever, and whoever signed up. So what happened was that I kind of lost that connection with the students, because sometimes they were bigger groups. And so COVID has kind of helped in teaching smaller groups and forming bigger connections. So there's more time to really get into each student and really help them in a much more personal way with their practice, and really form alliances with these people. And that has been truly, truly a gift.
Beautiful.
Since I started teaching again, I've had a lot of younger people too, like people coming with their teenage niece or daughter, or so I think COVID has helped expose that there's a generation that needs some attention. Sorry, Anthony, you were going to say something, and we talked at the same time.
I was just enjoying the silence. The golden silence. No, I think in years to come, we'll look back on the past 12 months or so and go, wow, wasn't it amazing that we could actually address, as Issy was saying, really give our time and attention to individual students. And, they may say, in conversation with other students, it may come and go, what do you mean you had a private course? I mean, now when you do a course with Issy, you're one of 2,000 people. She's so successful. You mean you actually spent 4 days talking to her, just you and her? Yes. And of course, what it'll do is it's forming the most fantastic foundation, a very solid foundation it may not be as many students as perhaps you expected, but the connection with the student is so much stronger, which of course then leads to a greater possibility of referrals.
Yeah.
And, the point you were making, Kristen, about, younger people being brought in by relations, I've seen that too, where, the adults, I mean, it often used to be, in an intro talk, well, when talking to a lady, she would say, well, this is not for me, but I think my husband should do this. That was quite often the riposte. And now it's, I think I would like to bring my children with me, and we'd like to do this course as a family. And, that's that hasn't occurred before, that people, perhaps lockdown has kind of brought families closer together. Maybe there are some dynamic tensions there, which they recognize would be eased by the whole family learning to meditate. That this would be a very pleasurable communal experience, which would perhaps diffuse the situation or reduce the heat in the family dynamic. And so I think there are all sorts of kind of interesting themes and currents being played out at the moment. And certainly in the UK, we're just next week, or on the 21st, we're technically about to come out of total lockdown. We're sort of almost out of lockdown. There are certain restrictions. But I would be interested to know whether you guys are experiencing what we're experiencing here, which is a degree of hesitancy about going back out. That, yes, during the initial stages of lockdown, people were very, very concerned, very stressed. It was the unknown, what's going to happen, how long is it going to last, et cetera, et cetera. Then people kind of got used to it. Now there's an equal but different sort of stress about re-emerging. And, people are afraid of taking public transport. People don't want to cross the city. They want to do everything local. Are you sort of witnessing that in California or in Mexico, where people are perhaps not quite, rather like a little rabbit, or mole, just poking its head out and having a little look around and saying, no, I don't actually like this, and then just going back in? Are people actually coming out and getting out and staying out, or is there this kind of reluctance?
In California, people are coming out pretty well, however, amongst my meditators, they've expressed what you're describing, which is kind of like, okay, now that there's been this massive reorganization on a global scale on so many different levels, what is this new world? And what is it? A lot of people don't want things to go back exactly the way they were, which is a good thing. When things go through change, it's good to evolve, but they're not exactly sure what they want the next thing to look like. And a lot of my students have gone through divorce. A lot have, had personal rashis along with the big global rashi. And so it's all unknown. And as with the unknown, a lot of people, people tend to be a little hesitant. But California right now, I think 90% of my county is vaccinated, and yet people are still wearing masks. So it's a pretty, it's nice in that sense that, it's feeling pretty safe. And so people are starting to come out more and be more social and getting over that anxiety a little bit, trying to find their new groove.
What's happening in Mexico, Izzy?
What I've been finding, Mexico, we're actually very surprised. The vaccination process has been very, very nice. I mean, the younger people don't have it yet, but a lot of Mexicans went to the States to get vaccinated. But what's been happening, because it was very interesting in Mexico, they had to stop the lockdown just because it was like, well, either the economy dies and people are going to starve, or people are going to die of COVID. So it was like the government was like, we need to start opening some businesses. So that's what they did. So in Mexico, people went out and everybody was with their mask on, and it was strange to go out and not see somebody with their mask on. But what's been a little interesting to see is how people now socialize different. It's been kind of a little hard to get back into the groove of just socializing. There's a bit of social anxiety, and if you're in a restaurant, it's like, oh, there's too many people, and people are like, I think I need to go back home. And so it's been interesting to see how it's affected people and how they socialize and how they interact with the world, because people became more conscious during COVID, which is something that also was a gift. How in COVID, a lot of people started meditating again, because some of our students meditate and then they kind of stop doing it. And then when you're faced with something as big as this, a lot of people began to meditate again. So I think there was a little bit of a consciousness revolution, but people they don't know how to now put it into the lives that we used to have.
Yeah, it's kind of like after IT, you come back to the same place, but you're like, I don't fit into this box anymore.
Yeah.
So.
How do I integrate?
Right.
Yeah.
I think I'm still integrating.
Yeah, there's been I think it's been an opportunity, to recalibrate, to kind of work out what's sustainable, what's relevant, what really matters. And I think certainly I have discovered that, I was just kind of running. I was looking at my diary from a couple of years ago, excuse me, and I was just exhausted reading my diary. Yeah, I did all that in a week. I was crossing town 3 times. I was running here, running there. I was like a headless chicken, being productive, but, it was kind of just stupid. And I think a lot of people have just said, do I really need to do all that kind of crazy stuff still? And, perhaps less is more, which as Vedic meditators, we understand that concept, that, to work smarter, not harder. Less is more. Let's just cut out all the fluff, the tinsel, the little sprinkles on the cappuccino, the things that look pretty but aren't necessary. Let's just get down to the core of what's really pertinent and what matters. And I think now what's happening is that there's this kind of adjustment going on. Okay, this is what I now would like to do, but now I've got to see how that fits in with what is available, what society is offering. And I think certainly it's interesting what you say, Kristen, about relationships floundering, not only marriages, but also friendships. I see quite a lot of, not in my case, but I see other people, some are delighted to have done what I call a little bit of social exfoliation. They've just kind of rubbed off a few people that they just didn't need, or who were sort of past their summer. And and for other people, it's caused a great deal of anguish because people have moved, and maybe they've moved out into the country, or they've moved back in with their family, and so the proximity, the availability of that friendship has changed. And so I think that's also adding to the sort of what I call the kind of sludge of anxiety, the kind of residue, the silt of anxiety that's kind of building up.
Yeah, I've been having a little bit of nostalgia for last summer, which was just this endless stretch of time. I was at Lake Tahoe with my kids, and every day it was just we go to the beach. What do you want to do? Nothing. And the summer has barely even started, and already I can't even. My calendar is so full, and I'm just like, oh, I miss that. I miss that just stretch of unstructured time. So, things are speeding up again, but hopefully we can, like you said, have a little more. We can filter things ourselves and say no more.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're just coming up to the hour. It's been such a delight having you on the show. We've had some good laughs. We've found out a lot about each other, and thank you so much. And I know that your multifaceted projects are going to just take off like a rocket, just at the right moment when the dynamic is there and when the universe is supporting you. You're just going to fly with this, and we wish you well with all of those. And I very much hope that we can all meet up in person very, very soon.
Me too. Thank you guys so much.
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for sticking around till the end. We hope you found the conversation stimulating, and it might have raised some questions of your own. We'd like to hear about them. This season, we want to engage with you, our audience, and would love to know what topics and themes would be of interest to you. Also, would you like to be our guest? Perhaps you might be interested in coming in on the show and talking with us. We'd love to have you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us with a direct message on our Instagram account. And for those of you who are not camera shy, please feel free to share a video with the hashtag #TheVedic Conversation. Goodbye.